The last lecture and chapter was dealing with Protestant Europe and Catholic Europe. And we were dealing with relatively the same time period that we're going to address here, but we're going to be all the way in East Asia. And this section covers a lot, as you will get with many. All right, so, you know, I'm aware that for a lot of the students, this will be the start of being a little bit overwhelmed. But again, take a deep breath, look back, maybe focus on certain parts of the section, the slides or topics that interest you most. Take notes on that, and as always, I'll remind you to jot down some things that you have questions about and send them my way, or have them post on discussion boards. Okie dokie. All right, so I'm a little sleepy today. I didn't get very good sleep. I'm sure many of you relate to such situations. All right, we're going to start with Japan. So the rulers were initially hereditary monarch. Okay, emperor is the official ruler and revered as a god. What's really interesting is how many cultures have emperor gods, right? What I think is also interesting is the way that over time many of these emperors or monarchs are only officially, in power. By the way, that's construction. I don't know if this is going through my recording, but again, as I mentioned, this complex keeps having noisy construction outside of it, and it's driving me nuts. All right, so okay, so you have an emperor revered as god, but by the 12th century, the shogun or the military commander becomes the real ruler. So what do I mean by official, and what do I mean by real? Essentially, what you have is the emperor being the symbolic unifier, but the real actor that's holding the power is in the shogunate, okay, the shoguns. And then you have daimyos, hereditary regional warlords. Now, Japan, we're going to see as a theme, attempts very strongly to be isolated. But as we were looking about mercantilism and the other subjects that I talked about in the last lecture, by the 16th century, Japanese were buying firearms from Portuguese and making their own. And I'll show you some pictures in a little bit of that. A lot of people don't think of this time period of Japan having firearms, but they did, and that was thanks to the Portuguese, if you want to say thanks. That's the right term. Kyoto at the time was ancient Japan's capital too. It's a very beautiful picture, right? Anyhow. All right, the Mongol invasions of Japan. For anyone who had my last class 106, or if you studied the 106 section, the Mongols pop up everywhere. They're invading like crazy, and no one seems to be free of them, whether it be the Islamic world, the Christian world, Far East Asian Buddhist world, whatever the case is, they were all over. And so in 1274 and 1281, they made these two significant invasions of Japan. Kublai Khan was one of those. He was a Mongol ruler that took control of China. Okay, and China had their own thoughts, or many of their writers and thinkers had their own feelings about him taking over China. But there were two launched massive naval invasions against Japan with hundreds of ships. And Japan was able to resist mainly or in large part due to some sea storms. And that's where we get the term kamikaze, or divine wind. And there's a picture depicting it. Kamikaze would end up being a word later used in World War II that had a more infamous idea. But here, these windstorms were seen as actually helping protect Japan by halting the Mongol invasion. And also keep in mind that Japan had a religion very heavily based in nature. Okay, So right over here. What's significant? And this is something that you're going to really, I want you to absorb. The first of only 2 instances when Japan's samurai, sounds like samurai are fighting outside my walls right now. Anyways, the first of only 2 instances when Japan's samurai fought foreigners rather than among themselves. For the most part, Japan did its best to remain isolated, but they were always fighting amongst themselves, not unifying and fighting against foreigners. And so I don't know, I just want you to think about that and the differences in the way that conflicts or international occurrences reorient maybe the way the power shifts and plays in geographic areas. So the unification of Japan is what I want to talk about in the next section, and I'm going to actually stop here, and I'm going to end up going over this for the next lecture.